Story 1. Echoing cooking. The answer is most things, but I am not a bad cook and I did not learn a single thing about it from either of them. Story 2. The only thing my parents taught me to do was yard work and cleaning. They basically used me as slave labor for everything they did not want to do. Story 3. Anything sexual or sex-based was considered evil, so I could not get any information from them. This includes their view on gay people who they also saw as evil. I was more of an extra roommate living at my grandparents' house until I was old enough to leave. I learned a lot on my own along the way. Money management, time management, taking responsibility for my mistakes, and self-control over bad habits. I do not gamble, drink, and rarely engage in fights, drama, or arguments. Those things are all bad for me. Story 4. Everything from riding a bike without training wheels, even taking the wheels off by myself at age 4 because Dad thought I was not ready for 2 wheels yet, to driving an actual car and everything in between. I am still not entirely sure that I am doing laundry correctly. Story 5. Shaving. I was given an electric shaver and that was it. I still wouldn't know how to properly shave with a regular razor. Story 6. Most things. Fixing anything, cars or otherwise, is a big one. I am far from being a professional at it now, but I can get by. Story 7. How to sew buttons back on my shirts and repair tears in my clothing. I do not want to throw a shirt away just because a button fell off. I learned how to sew to fix my clothes. Story 8. How much cheating can really hurt the other person. Hearing how much I hurt the first person I was in love with will always be stuck in my head. I guess it is a good thing since I was the cause. Story 9. Yes. I am learning how to deal with my emotions because I do not think I was ever taught how to identify them. Story 10. Cooking. By middle school, I was going through puberty and got hungry a lot. My older brother also got hungry. My younger brother is 4 years younger than me, so we had to help get him something to eat. It started with us boiling noodles. Then it turned into experimental cooking. I realized I was a better cook than my parents. My parents eventually realized that as well, and I ended up cooking Thanksgiving dinners and other big holiday meals as time went on. I still do. Story 11. I don't think anyone else has mentioned this, so I will explain how to have sex. I enjoyed learning and probably knew more than most by the time I actually had sex for the first time. Story 12. Soft skills at work. No matter what you do, you have to participate effectively or you will not progress. Story 13. Dating in general. Arranged marriage culture, so everything was learned through observation and trial and error. Story 14. I don't think my dad actually taught me any skills. He was an example of someone who could do his own mechanical work, plumbing, and carpentry, and that was enough. Story 15. I was taught how to drive in a driving class I had to pay for. I learned how to suppress my emotions because I would get beat for showing any emotion. I also learned how to take a punch from a grown man. The rest I learned on my own. Story 16. Where to start? The one that hurts the most is emotional regulation. That is right up there with taking responsibility for everyone's feelings. Story 17. Discipline. I barely did homework during high school and did what I wanted. Not that I got in trouble or anything, but I wasted a lot of years because of it. Luckily, where I worked right after finishing school, my boss took me under his wing and gave me a bit of a push to improve. Story 18. From a woman in her mid-40s. This is eye-opening, terrifying, depressing, and maddening all at once. Story 19. My dad tried to teach me all kinds of things. I was not paying attention, though. Now I am having to learn everything the hard way. Story 20. Sweeping the floor, I guess, but it is hard for me to think of much else. For what it is worth, I think there are different kinds of parent-child relationships and not all of them revolve around parents teaching life skills. My experience with my parents was much more about giving me the emotional support to grow and learn on my own. My wife's was the same way. On the other hand, my cousins are still very dependent on their father and rely on him for life skill coaching into their 40s. Story 21. Being able to let some things slide. My parents were actually great and supported my sister and me in almost every aspect of life. They were truly amazing. However, this also created the downside that I expected myself to perform at the same high level. I had to learn that, having no children of my own and no one else to rely on, I could perfectly go a week without dusting my entire place, did not have to be at peak performance every day, and could supplement proper home cooking occasionally when I just did not feel like it. Realizing that I did not have to be perfect to be self-sufficient, healthy, and happy was quite liberating. Sadly, this only really settled in after both my parents died, so from when I was 40. Story 22. They did not have time for me growing up, so I had to teach myself basically everything. I am 55 now and still remember having to figure out how to change a tire, do laundry, cook actual meals, manage money, all completely on my own because they could not be bothered. The life skills were one thing, but the emotional neglect was worse. I never learned how to handle relationships, express feelings, or deal with conflict in a healthy way because there was no example at home. My parents were too wrapped up in their own issues to actually raise me. I remember being a kid and already knowing I was just an inconvenience to them. They would get irritated when I needed help with school or wanted to share something I was excited about. So I learned early to just figure everything out myself and stay out of their way. I am still unpacking the damage from growing up unwanted. It affects how you see yourself, how you relate to others, and how you parent your own children if you have them. You spend decades trying to fill gaps that should never have existed in the first place. Story 23. I grew up without a father. I was quite the reader. I now repair my own cars, hunt, and might be an expert fly fisherman some days. Story 24. Financial literacy. Growing up, I learned nothing about the markets, investing, 401k plans, individual retirement accounts, and so on. It was not until my 30s that I started researching this on my own. Story 25. Ironing, cooking, making my bed, handling my finances, how to polish boots, how to shoot guns, and survive a chemical attack. Although to be fair, all of those things were taught to me by a great big hairy sergeant who was effectively my surrogate mother for 18 months, so I do not know if that counts. Story 26. Finances. I learned the hard way. Now I have a credit score over 800. Story 27. How to rely on myself completely and not expect anything from anyone. I had to unlearn a lot of negative patterns. Story 28. Shaving. My father never got around to showing me how, so I decided to just do it myself. Not that I shave very often anyway. Story 29. How to keep calm and not lose my temper. How not to yell when I am frustrated. Generally, emotional intelligence. Story 30. Tying my shoes. I remembered I wanted to learn how to do it, but my mom did not want to teach me yet. Maybe she thought I was too young, so I figured it out for myself. I knew you started by crossing the two laces over each other in a half hitch. After that, I made loops with the ends and did the same with the loops. It worked, and it was a long time before I learned how to properly tie my shoes. Story 31. The only thing they sort of taught me was how to drive, and to be honest, I mainly learned that from video games and driver's education. Nothing else. My father wouldn't let me cook, clean, or do manual hobbies because they are expensive. The only thing he forced me to do was mow the lawn once a week, which was unnecessary. No one cares about how your lawn looks unless it is knee-high wild grass. Story 32. Fixing and building computers, including hardware and software. I do not know if this is considered a skill. Story 33. The most important money management lesson I learned is that credit is not bad. I used to think credit was bad until I got a credit card 2 years ago. My credit score went from around 500 to 745 in 2 years. Story 34. Personal finance. My family was never poor, but we never really had much extra money for savings. I didn't understand how interest rates work, how loans work, how retirement accounts or investments work. We never talked about money, and my dad never let me know how much he made or what he did with it. I paid the price when I didn't understand how student loans worked, and I took out $130,000 worth for college. I have a high-paying job and plenty of money these days, but I was on my own when it came to how to get out of debt, done, how to buy a house, done, how to start a retirement account, done, and how to invest, done. My parents' idea of helping me with college was to co-sign for my very first loan and only my very first loan. They didn't give me any money or advice, just said, "Good luck, son," and watched as I struggled. They even charged me rent in the summer when I came home from college. I got really good quickly about personal finance once I started to make some money, and I'm very open and transparent with my nieces and nephews about how to pay for college, how to save, and how to invest so they don't repeat the mistakes I made. I don't have kids of my own because I wasn't sure how to afford them, and by the time I could, I was in my late 30s and chose not to. My family knows I'm the one to go to if they have questions about investments, and I tell them what I would do if I were in their position. It makes me feel good that my nieces and nephews actively seek me out for advice and actually listen to what I have to tell them. I never tell them what to do. I tell them what I would do and why, and in that way I'm helping educate them to make their own smart decisions. Story 35. Computer skills. I am lucky that my mother and father taught me everything from cooking and baking, cleaning and laundry, minor repairs and changing tires, sewing and ironing, and how to shop and budget. However, they did not have knowledge about computers. Story 36. How to tie a necktie, how to shave, how to change a flat tire. I lost my dad when I was 10. There was no father figure after that. Later, I learned how to fix the car after my mom learned to drive. I still do not know how to properly coordinate colors in my dressing. I have to study how other men dress to get ideas. I truly believe it was a result of not having a father figure to teach me. But who knows, maybe it is something else. Story 37. Literally everything. My father tried so hard to teach me not to be bad that he forgot to teach me the good things. Story 38. It is okay to ask for help. Also, if someone is unhelpful, it is not because of me. It is because of them. Story 39. Just about everything, to be honest. My father was reasonably handy, but he never bothered to teach me anything. I don't hold it against him. Teaching takes patience. He was a good role model for many other things. Story 40. Practically everything. I learned to cook on my own, to use tools, to budget, and more. My mother cooked but never taught me anything. They did not know how to do much, and that is not an insult. They came from poor families and were mostly just happy to have a home. Story 41. Problem solving. I love my parents, but dear God, dealing with my siblings or family, I am always forced to deal with their anger issues or bipolar disorder. I am good at being adaptable now, though, so I guess that is a positive. Story 42. Having been kicked out at 16 with no job or support, I had to survive financially, socially, and mentally. Story 43. Managing my finances, as well as maintaining a healthy lifestyle both physically and mentally. Lastly, how to communicate properly. I have learned many home skills from my dad. How to paint, lay a wooden floor, fix small electrical issues, repair my bike, maintain my car without going to a mechanic for simple problems, garden, and more. However, they never taught me the value of money, which almost destroyed me. They also never taught me my self-worth, which nearly destroyed me as well. I have taught myself how to manage my finances, but I still struggle with self-worth and self-appreciation. I have always felt worthy only when I provide. And as a man, that might not be a bad lesson if it weren't for the impact of that feeling on my mental health. Adding to that, I never learned to talk about issues. All we did at home was sweep things under the carpet. As a result, I rarely talk about always feeling worthless except in the anonymous online world. Story 44. They did not teach me much, but my grandmother taught me bookkeeping and longhand tax preparation. I am very grateful for that. Story 45. Most, and at age 60 and above, some I may still be learning. But it is good to never stop learning. By the time I was 9, my parents divorced. My father quickly was mostly out of the picture, not entirely by his own choosing. My mother had to work, so my younger sibling and I were soon latchkey kids. I was mostly self-taught, plus of course whatever kindergarten through 12th grade and some college taught me. By age 13, I was in charge of all household, appliance, and electronics maintenance and repairs. I did all the yard work, including mowing the lawn and sometimes picking up extra odd jobs for neighbors to earn a few dollars. I replaced the water heater, fixed plumbing, replaced the garbage disposal, repaired televisions, radios, other electronics, car stereos, tape players, and electrical systems. I also did various construction work, including operating the circular saw. It was a pretty boring city with not much in it other than many people and track houses, so I went on long bicycle rides, 20 miles out. Then I turned back because the next city, if it can even be called that, was another 30 miles out with nothing but boring two-lane highway between, with negligible shoulder, highway speed traffic, and big rigs. Much of the first 20 miles already had plenty of that. By the time I barely had my license at 16, around 10 o'clock at night, my sister called. She was only 12 or maybe 13. She and her friend of the same age had hitchhiked 100 miles away to see their favorite boy band. Wearing skimpy outfits and handmade I Heart t-shirts for the band's lead singer, they had scored backstage passes. My sister was telling my mother they were invited to come back with the band to the hotel and spend the night and was asking if it was okay to return later the next day. My mother handed me her car keys and said, "Go fetch your sister now." It was 100 miles away at night, mostly on roads I was not familiar with. It was a school night and I was already tired. I went to fetch my sister and her friend. Meanwhile, my mother went straight to bed because she had to get up early for work. I learned some responsibility too, although I had little choice. I also mostly taught myself how to cook, among many other things. I didn't learn much cooking at home, only a few simple dishes like hot dogs in a pan. As a latchkey kid, most of my home cooking experience involved my mother leaving instructions on what to take out of the freezer, when and at what temperature to put it in the oven, because when she got home she expected dinner to be ready. My siblings and I had to eat too. After college and living on my own, I got a copy of The Joy of Cooking and figured it out from there. Mostly I avoided disasters, with rare exceptions. For example, don't freeze lettuce. That doesn't work. And don't put sugar in soup. I figured out a lot on my own. Motivation, drive, hard work, and self-discipline, because my mother was not teaching most of that, and my father was mostly out of the picture. However, he did plant some good influences early on, much of which I applied in his absence. Story 46. How to budget and not just buy everything I want without consideration for my future or the possibility that I may need large sums of money all at once. Luckily, I figured all this out about 5 years before having my first child. Thank God. Story 47. I do not want to be like my parents because I will mentally harm my children and make them as sociopathic as I am. Story 48. Right from wrong, brushing my teeth, how to function in society, reasons education is important, birth control, religion, hygiene, drugs, and alcohol. Mostly, any parenting responsibilities were put aside in favor of chain smoking in front of a black and white television. As an accidental birth, being my fault and all, did not give me regular family standing. Just a feral kid wandering around the streets. Story 49. Hygiene. I was the stinky kid in school, and I got bullied relentlessly for it. I did not wear deodorant until I was 15. Now I am squeaky clean, baby. Story 50. My parents were great, but I had to go elsewhere to learn how to genotype an organism using polymerase chain reaction and gel electrophoresis. Story 51. Discipline, standing up for myself, financial education, and shaving. They taught me how to be a good human being, taught me manners, kindness, and many other things for which I am grateful. Story 52. Possibly weird, but shaving. Luckily, the basics are intuitive. Apply some shaving cream or soap, then use the razor similar to television advertisements and the rare observations of how Dad did it. Nuances and tips came later, after the internet was invented. Story 53. All of them. I am a better cook than my mother because I never learned from her. She cooks all the time but does not exactly enjoy it. I am pretty good at picking apart recipes and reverse engineering them, which is how I managed to figure out my grandmother's Creole chicken and sausage spaghetti recipe. It is not exactly the same, but they taste identical, which is what counts. My aunts and uncles had spent a decade trying to recreate it. I did it in 2 attempts. Story 54. How to be a modern man. My dad was from the baby boomer generation and never taught me how to interact with people, especially women. Story 55. 1. Stopping after 2 drinks. 2. Avoiding getting involved in arguments with a partner who is experiencing a momentary episode of pushing buttons. She is working on it. Story 56. Riding bicycles, motorcycles, and driving cars. I was very ashamed of myself for not being able to ride or drive during high school and college because my father would not allow me to. Took a lot of courage to buy a vehicle and learn on my own, and I am very proud that I did. Story 57. How to fix literally anything in the house. My mother somewhat taught me to cook. My father did not really teach me anything. I learned about cars from my brother and conversational skills from one of my older male cousins. Story 58. My parents did not teach me much. My father knew a lot, but he believed I would need to get a good job so I could pay others. That is flawed logic. Some of the important things include driving, cooking, taxes, and other financial matters, basic home repairs and basic car maintenance, playing sports. Story 59. I do not remember my parents teaching me many things, but they often demanded things from me that they never took the time to explain or teach. In these situations, I responded by saying that they were incompetent and did not teach me, so I did what I thought was the best option. Story 60. I had to teach myself how to drive a manual transmission vehicle. I bought one when I was living on my own and taught myself at night since there was less traffic on the road. Story 61. Investment strategy. They taught me to save by starting early. They taught me to think conservatively because the time value of money is your friend. But I had to learn about investment options on my own. Took a lot of time but paid good dividends. In my experience, wealth managers typically promote what benefits them. They are less teachers and more sales agents. This is not an ideal path for learning about the entire market, in my opinion. Story 62. Everything. My father worked 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. My mother believed children should be seen and not heard. Story 63. Most of them? My parents decided I was amazing at everything regardless of whether I was or not. I have basically had to teach myself everything, and I am always a little late to figuring it out. It is great. Story 64. Silly as it may sound, I taught myself how to tie my shoes. I think they did show me, but I could never grasp it. Same with ties. How to clean plates properly and ironing. Most mechanical car-based things I now know, all self-taught. My dad is a mechanical engineer. What I've really realized is that as I've gotten older and have my own child, my parents also did not know what they were doing. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.